husband's favorite combination is mint and chocolate. So I've been trying to figure out something I could make him that was pie-like, because if you've ever been to my house, he doesn't like pie for the most part. So I'm working on a chocolate mint tart. And here we are. So I'm going to start with my crust. I have a 1 1/4 cups of flour. I have a 1/2 cup of powdered sugar. I have a 1/4 cup of Dutch processed cocoa, which means that there's an alkaline in it that has taken out some of the acidity. So it's different than regular cocoa powder. You need the Dutch on this one. And then a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm gonna put all this together in my food processor and pulse it. Then I have a 1/2 cup of butter, which is 1 stick that I have cut into tiny pieces, and it's in the refrigerator because it has to be super cold. So we're gonna get that out and then we'll start up. So here's my stick of butter. I've cut it into tiny little, cubed it basically. And now I'm going to put it into my food processor. And like most pie crusts, I'm going to pulse this until I get coarse crumbles. I want it to look like wet sand. All right, then I'm going to take 1 egg yolk and a tablespoon of water. I'm going to mix them together with this fork. And we're going to pour this in to bring the dough together. See how it's forming together? This is exactly what we want. So now I'm going to wrap this in plastic wrap and we're going to refrigerate it for an hour before we come back and roll it out. So the dough itself is in kind of pieces in the bottom of my food processor. So all I'm going to do is take it and squish it together. The oils in my hands will help to form a ball with it. You want to make sure you get all the pieces, just like that. And then, now that it's all one giant ball, put it in plastic wrap. I flatten it so that it cools faster. And then we will wrap it, put it in the refrigerator. So our chocolate tart crust has been in the refrigerator for the last hour. Now I have a lightly floured surface and I'm going to roll it out. For this, I'm using a tart pan, which has a removable bottom so that I can pop it out and let it maintain the shape of the tart pan. So I'm going to roll out the crust and then we got to put it in the freezer for 30 minutes. And then we'll bake it. All right. So what I'm going to do is press in the sides to make sure that the dough is fully covered all the way around. And then one of the cool things about tart pans is you can take your rolling pin and go right over the top like that, and it cuts off all the excess crust. So we're going to put this in the freezer and preheat our oven to 375 degrees so we can start baking as soon as we get back. So I had some extra dough left over, so I made 4 of these little tartlets, which I'm kind of excited about. And we are going to bake this in a 375-degree oven for 25 minutes. So our tart crust was in the oven for 25 minutes. They are out, and now we need to cool them off. I'm actually going to leave these out overnight, and then we'll make the filling in the morning. So the crust for our chocolate mint tart has been chilling in the refrigerator overnight, and now we're gonna make our mint infused cream. So I have 1 1/3 cups of heavy cream. And then I have 15 grams of fresh mint that I'm just going to put in here. And we are going to bring this on medium-high heat to a simmer, and then we're going to remove it from the heat and just let it sit for an hour so that that mint gets totally infused into that cream. So if you can see, there are little bubbles popping up all around the outside of the cream. This means we're done. All we're gonna do is turn off the heat, stir it one last time, and then I'm gonna set it over here and set a timer, and we'll be back in an hour. So our mint infused cream has been steeping for the last hour, hour and a half. Now I'm going to pour it through a sieve so that I can get all those pieces of the mint out, because we want a smooth ganache and then a smooth whipping cream when we do that. And I'm going to press down on the leaves to make sure that we get every ounce of that cream that we can. And there we are. Now I'm going to take 1 cup of this and reserve it for later so that when the pie is finished, or the tart is finished, we can add mint flavored whipped cream on top. So I'm just going to pour a cup of this in here and put this in the refrigerator. And then I'm going to reheat the last 3/4 of a cup until it's simmering, and then pour it over my white chocolate. So I've got my 3/4 of a cup of heavy cream that I have heated up, and I'm going to pour it over a cup, 1 3/4 cups of white chocolate. It's really 10 1/2 ounces, but if you're not into weighing, it's 1 3/4 cups. And we're going to whisk it with the cream until smooth. And if it doesn't melt all of the white chocolate, then we just need to create a double boiler and put it back on the stove to heat it up. But you want to put it in your mixing bowl because we're going to have to whisk it all together in a moment. So the white chocolate isn't fully melting. I think we're going to have to create a double boiler and get it back on the stove. So if you've ever watched me make ganache, there is a video on how to do the double boiler and to heat up if your ganache the chocolate doesn't melt. So we're just going to do that again. So after heating it up on the double boiler, all of our chocolate is melted. We're going to let it sit, cool off for about 30 minutes before we whisk it up into a thick cream. So our white chocolate ganache has been chilling. I am now going to add 2 tablespoons of softened butter and 1/8 teaspoon of salt. And then we are going to whisk this on high for 10 minutes or until it gets light and fluffy. So our whipped ganache is ready. It's been there for about 10 minutes. Now I'm going to take it out of the mixing bowl. At this point, if you're making this at home, test it, taste it, see if there's enough mint in it for you. If there's not, you can add another half a teaspoon of mint extract, which is what I'm gonna do. If there is enough, if you taste it and it tastes good to you, don't bother adding the extra teaspoon or half a teaspoon. So see how light and fluffy it is now? All I'm gonna do is put that into my chilled pie shell, tart shell. And then figure out what I'm gonna put in my other tart shells. Because all of this is gonna go in the big one. So I'm gonna spoon a little bit of this out of my big tart because I realized that I have 2 more layers to put on and this is gonna overflow. And we don't wanna do that. So I'm gonna spoon a little bit off and put them into the mini tarts and then we'll be back. So my husband says I should stop doubting myself and I'm trying to believe him. It's really difficult. But anyway, I ended up making all 4 of the mini tarts with the filling and the large tart. So we're gonna stick these in the refrigerator and we'll be back in an hour. So we're gonna make our bittersweet ganache for our chocolate mint tart now. I have 3.5 ounces of bittersweet chocolate over here in a bowl, chopped up, 2 tablespoons of butter that I'm just gonna add to it. And then I have a half a cup of heavy cream that we are going to heat up, basically simmer, and then pour over so that it melts the chocolate and we'll whisk it all together. So our cream is simmering. Now I'm going to pour it over that bittersweet chocolate. And start whisking. So we're going to whisk this until it's smooth. Which basically means I gotta get the last little piece of butter to melt. And then we're gonna let it cool for about 15 minutes before we add it to our white chocolate ganache layer on our tart. So our ganache is cool enough that I can spread it onto the white chocolate. If you add it when it's too warm, you'll mix them together and they won't be 2 distinct layers, they'll just be a swirl. So you want a light layer of this. I'm going to use my offset spatula just to make sure it goes all the way around. There we go. Then we'll do my tartlets. And then we'll put this back in the refrigerator for another hour before we make our mint whipped cream. All right, they're gonna go back in the fridge. So our chocolate tarts have been in the refrigerator, chilling for an hour with that ganache. Now I'm gonna take that mint infused heavy cream that we made earlier today and I'm going to put it right into my mixer along with 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar. We are going to mix this on high until whipped cream appears. Stiff heat. So we have whipped up that cream. Now this is not like a regular whipped cream that you can pipe out. This is going to be one that you're just going to spread over the top. So what I'm going to do, take my little offset spatula and cover the top. And then we will put this back in the refrigerator, let that whipped cream topping thicken up, and then we'll cut into it. And there we are.